very unclear why this Israeli tank would have fired on a UN position, a UN tower. And this comes after Israeli Merkava tanks, they actually dug into positions around an Irish peacekeeping base here in Lebanon. They have since moved. I believe there was some pressure put on from New York and other places, and these tanks have withdrawn from that position. But they had moved earth and dug their tanks into positions right on just outside the wall of this Irish peacekeeping base. So there have also been reports by the UNIFIL peacekeepers here that there's cameras and some of the telecommunications equipment has been destroyed by Israeli hits, Israeli military hits. So it's a very sort of worrying escalation again.
Well, Oliver Marsden is a journalist in Beirut covering the conflict for The Times. Oliver, good morning.
Good morning.
Thank you for joining us. So the deadliest night since this escalation. Just describe what has happened and where.
So yes, last night there were two strikes, two really very large strikes here in what is almost the center of Beirut, outside the Dahieh, the southern suburbs of Beirut. It's in fact about just over half a mile from where I'm sitting here right now in Beirut. And as you said, 22 people have died so far and 117 injured. Now, these were in areas run by the kind of the Amal political movement. It's a political party. It's a Shia party. It's headed by the Speaker of Parliament, Nabi Berri, and they are very much closely aligned. They're allies of Hezbollah. Yes, it's believed that a high-ranking member of Hezbollah was the target. There hasn't been any announcement from Hezbollah whether this person was hit, but he's the head of security for Hezbollah. He's also the brother-in-law of Hassan Nasrallah. So it was, very, very loud strikes. I spoke to people who actually said that they heard a kind of whoosh of a missile over their heads. They felt it was right over their heads. And this site is about 300 meters away from the French embassy here. So a real kind of escalation and a widening of the scope of these strikes within the capital here.
Yeah. What can you tell us as well about these strikes that have hit UN peacekeepers, with a couple wounded, other sort of UN peacekeeping targets didn't result in any injuries, but it's just a kind of notable cause of concern.
Yes, I mean, this is very strange. There was one hit on this UN position, which is down very close to the coast and very close to the border next to the town of Nakora in the south of Lebanon. There were actually two Malaysian UN peacekeepers in a watchtower, in a tower, and it was fired on by a Israeli Merkava tank. Now, I'm still trying to get more information, and it's not sure if the men managed to jump out of the tower before it was hit or if they got thrown out of the tower, but they are injured and they're in hospital, but they're going to be okay. And it's very unclear why this Israeli tank would have fired on a UN position, a UN tower. And this comes after Israeli Merkava tanks, they actually dug into positions around an Irish peacekeeping base here in Lebanon. They have since moved. I believe there was some pressure put on from New York and other places, and these tanks have withdrawn from that position. But they had moved earth and dug their tanks into positions right on just outside the wall of this Irish peacekeeping base. So there have also been reports by the UNIFIL peacekeepers here that there's cameras and some of the telecommunications equipment has been destroyed by Israeli hits, Israeli military hits. So it's a very sort of worrying escalation again.
Yeah, and we should also note that Israel say Hezbollah is continuing to fire into Israel from Lebanon as well. So, the back and forth continues.
Yes, I mean, very much so. Despite the continued air campaign, Hezbollah is still firing rockets into northern Israel. It's fired rockets towards the port city of Haifa. And so, I think the as much as these airstrikes are really taking out the top echelon of Hezbollah, it's not the case of cutting the head off the snake. I think it more of it like an octopus. The arms are still fighting, and by that I mean on the ground, Hezbollah are still fighting the Israeli military, and they're still able to fire rockets into Israel. So I think this ground invasion could be very tricky for the Israeli military. It's very much a fight on home turf for Hezbollah. They know the terrain, it's mountainous, and Hezbollah doesn't have an air force, doesn't have any air superiority. So a fight on the ground is very much probably what they are after right now.
Yeah. Oliver, thank you very much. Good to speak to you this morning. That's Oliver Marsden reporting from Beirut. You can read more of Oliver's coverage in the Times as well. Meanwhile, then, in Gaza, the conflict will pause to allow a second round of polio vaccinations on Monday for nearly 600,000 children under 10. Let's speak to Sam Rose, Deputy Director of UNRWA in Gaza. Sam, good morning.
Good morning.
So this pause in the conflict is good news, certainly by way of the vaccination programme. Is there any indication that it could be extended, for example, and turn into something of a more sustained ceasefire?
I mean, look, we all hope this. This is what we've hoped for since the 7th of October last year. You will recall we had a short pause at the end of November last year when some of the hostages taken by Hamas on the 7th of October were released. But look, I just want to clarify this pause that we hope will be maintained for the second round of polio, if it follows the same model that we had in the first round, will be time bound and it will be geographically bound. What we had during the first round was Gaza was split into three: central, south, and north. And for a 3 or 4 day period in each of those areas in sequence, there was a pause in fighting for about 8 hours. So there's no question that this will be a pause in fighting across the Gaza Strip. We all know that more than anything, we need a comprehensive, complete, lasting ceasefire. But this will be a very temporary arrangement, is at least what we understand. And look, given the intensity of the fighting in northern Gaza right now, particularly in Jabalia, in Beit Lahia, in the north, we're also struggling to see right now how an effective polio campaign can go ahead, given the dangers that our staff will face administering the vaccines, but also the dangers faced by people in these areas trying to reach any health clinics or health points.
Can you tell us in a kind of broader sense what the need is in Gaza right now? What do people require?
I mean, put simply, people require for this hell, for this misery to come to an end. People have been living in the most abject of conditions for over a year now. They are beaten down in terms of their health. Widespread outbreaks of infectious diseases, high rates of malnutrition, mental trauma, physical trauma. You can count on the streets. People with missing limbs, children, young people, old people. There is very, very little aid getting into Gaza right now. No commercial supplies have come in since the start of the month. Water is in short supply. Electricity is in short supply. Toilets are non-existent. Sanitary materials, hygiene materials are non-existent. People need everything, and the only way they can get that is if the conflict comes to an end, if the hostages are released, and we can get on to a path for something better than this, because otherwise the situation will just continue to get worse. That's the nature of things like this, when people are out in the open under savage bombardment for such long periods of time.
Who would you say, Sam, is in charge on the ground in Gaza?
Who's in charge on the ground? Look, we've seen, we have Israeli troops around and inside large parts of Gaza. We have Hamas, who officially in charge, have had to go to ground because of the nature of the operation. We have a real breakdown in law and order. Police, who would normally be providing civil protection for the population, for aid agencies such as ourselves, are non-existent. So we have no effective control on the ground right now. People are being bombarded from all sides. Looters attack aid when it comes in. So, I mean, the communities are holding themselves together, but very, very hard to talk of anyone having effective control. Look, Gazans have no control over any aspect of their life right now, whether they drink tomorrow, whether they get through the night. They have no control over any aspects of their life. That has immediate consequences, but it also has long-term consequences when eventually we collectively have to rebuild from this.
Okay. Sam, thank you very much. Thank you for joining us. Sam Rose is the Deputy Director of UNRWA in Gaza.